But the insurrection gathering taking place on Monday is not going to be held on the steps of the U.S. Capitol, nor is it going to be held on the National Mall. That's because temperatures are predicted to be in the 20s, and Donald Trump doesn't want to be shriveled up on that day. I guess he can't afford a coat and gloves and a hat. I remember vividly being out there when Obama was inaugurated, and it was cold as hell in 2009. It's just called layer up. So all the events are happening indoors, and MAGA world, man, they're not happy. Listen to this wine fest.
At Capitol One Arena for folks, but nobody's going to be outside now. What's your reaction to that?
So we're not going to get to see it in person then. Is that correct?
That's right.
Well, I don't like it. I mean, we came all the way from Washington, from Oklahoma, and, now we're not going to get to see it. We might as well stay home and watch it on TV.
It sucks. Let me rephrase that. It's not good.
Yeah, it's actually something that we've been looking forward to for historical purposes, and being a part of it, that's once in a lifetime.
Absolutely.
We made all the plans, all the arrangements to come up and be a part of this event. And all of a sudden to hear that it's being moved indoors,
we're prepared for the weather. It's not a problem.
It's kind of like a bummer.
It is, yeah. It's not.
Cold ain't gonna hurt nobody. And we have farms, and we don't get to.
That's a bummer. They're not going to be able to stand out there with a couple other thousand people and watch the orange one being sworn in. I feel so bad for them. Hell no. Absolutely not. Yes, I'm being absolutely petty and will always be that way. Here's the deal. Michael, he knows full well this will be one of the smallest crowds ever. And we know how he lost his mind last time and sent Sean Spicer out there to lie about how this was the largest crowd ever. Dude, go sit your little monkey ass down. Bottom line is, and listen, dude, listen, I can tell you right now, previous inaugurations, the Friday and the weekend of, the city is bustling. D.C. is not bustling right now. It's not.
D.C. is probably trembling because this is afraid of what's about to happen. Now what's interesting, Roland, is Trump said there's an Arctic blast sweeping the country. I don't want to see people hurt or injured in any way. Well, you ain't say that on January 6th when the domestic terrorists stormed the U.S. Capitol and assaulted 140 police officers, and you sat there for 187 minutes and watched it and didn't do anything. You ain't say you didn't want the police injured. You didn't say you didn't want members of Congress and the U.S. Senate injured. So, there's a joke in there somewhere about hell freezing over or something like that. I'm not a comedian, so I'll leave it up to the comedians. They'll probably talk about it tonight on the nightly shows. But what's interesting is this Arctic blast is also tied to climate change. Donald Trump is a climate change denier. OK, so maybe this is Mother Nature having revenge on Donald Trump some way. And maybe he'll have a frozen moment like Mitch McConnell did also.
Well, Morgan, you're the economist, and I think on my iPad. Hotels are 70% booked for the inauguration. That doesn't sound like big of a deal. And all of these poor people, Morgan, some who paid $1,500 a night, $900 a night, they're upset because they're now going to have to watch it on television. Boo-hoo.
Well, one of my first reactions to this news was that it could be the tech CEOs who are really in Trump's ear. I mean, the fact that Mark Zuckerberg was planning to attend, Jeff Bezos, these guys don't do cold anymore. They're rising above all the elements with all of their money and private jets. And if they had announced they're going to be at the inauguration, I don't know if they wanted to deal with 20-degree weather. And as we know, this is turning into the billionaire administration for Donald Trump based on some of the early moves. So I think we all need to pay attention to that. Why are the big tech CEOs so invested in the future of Donald Trump? It has a lot to do with the fact that they're all facing lawsuits from the federal government that they want to go away. And they're hoping that through their presence, through their money. They've all donated money to the inauguration in the millions of dollars, that they will escape any sort of accountability based on how they violated the law through their companies over the last several years. So to be determined what this administration ends up doing, but for sure, that's why these big tech guys are so attached to Trump at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And I was texting her earlier, Matt, my buddy, Dr. Ebony Hilton. She's not as petty as I am, but she's close. She tweeted this: "Ooh, the hotel airline data must have alerted that the inauguration was going to be teeny tiny. Couldn't be me."
Yeah, I think Michael and Morgan brought up some things I hadn't even considered about the lawsuits and about climate change. And what jumped out to me about this is there could just be some people who are concerned about what could happen and said, otherwise I would normally go to the inauguration. But obviously we know what happened on January 6th and just are leery about being present in D.C., even some Trump supporters who just may not want to be caught up in the fracas. But I will tell you, I was in college when Mr. Obama was inaugurated, and I stood out on that National Mall, and it was one of the coldest nights I remember. So I think this is a blessing in disguise for those people from Florida and Oklahoma, because it was going to be brutal out there. But I'm sure there are some reasons that the Trump administration decided not to do this, chief among which they didn't think there'd be enough people out there to be able to say they had a huge crowd. So
right,
I'm sure it's part and parcel with that.
Because you were speaking of 2009, and y'all, this right here is an image of the 2009 inauguration. Oh, let me keep going. Trust me, I don't have to swipe down that much for 2017, Michael.
Oh, absolutely. Once again, Donald Trump is small in comparison to President Barack Obama. Barack Obama, on the campaign trail, he made a hand gesture. Actually, he's at the Democratic National Convention. He made. Oh,
and by the way, it was 28 degrees on that cold day in January 2009.
Well, I live in Detroit, so that's a heat wave.
Well, it was 28 degrees and sunny. I remember being near the steps when I was with CNN, and we were there, and the bleachers were right next to us. The bleachers blocked the sun. Yo, it was a hell of a lot colder than 28 degrees. It felt more like -5 sitting there. But Michael, go ahead.
Yeah. 28 degrees is a heat wave for us in January here in Detroit. But Donald Trump's going to be petty. He'll probably send somebody out once again to lie about the size. I remember he sent Sean Spicer out. I remember Sean Spicer said this is the largest crowd in
hold up. You hold up, Michael. You know I got to be real petty. And so if y'all want to see small, teeny, tiny, petulant Sean Spicer made to look like an absolute dumbass, when Trump ordered him to go out and, damn it, set the record straight. So here's our Comedy Central moment for the day.
Photographs of the inaugural proceedings were intentionally framed in a way, in one particular tweet, to minimize the enormous support that had gathered on the National Mall. This was the first time in our nation's history that floor coverings have been used to protect the grass in the mall. That had the effect of highlighting any areas where people were not standing, while in years past, the grass eliminated this visual. This was also the first time that fencing and magnetometers went as far back on the wall, preventing hundreds of thousands of people from being able to access the mall as quickly as they had in inaugurations past. Inaccurate numbers involving crowd size were also tweeted. No one had numbers because the National Park Service, which controls the National Mall, does not put any out. By the way, this applies to any attempts to try to count the number of protesters today in the same fashion. We do know a few things, so let's go through the facts. We know that from the platform where the president was sworn in to 4th Street holds about 250,000 people. From 4th Street to the media tent is about another 220,000. And from the media tent to the Washington Monument, another 250,000 people. All of this space was full when the president took the oath of office. We know that 420,000 people used the D.C. Metro public transit yesterday, which actually compares to 317,000 that used it for President Obama's last inaugural. This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period, both in person and around the globe. Even the New York Times printed a photograph showing that a misrepresentation of the crowd in the original tweet in their paper, which showed the full extent of the support, depth, and crowd and intensity that existed.
Oh. I had to go ahead and play that because he looked like a damn fool, Michael.
And the presidency, Trump's administration went downhill from there. It was one chaos after another. It was the most chaotic thing that we had ever seen. And he had the highest turnover rate when it came to staffers, when it came to members of his cabinet, all of this, because Donald Trump cannot govern. And as I said last week, the sequel to the horror movie is usually worse than the first installment. And we're about to see the horror movie start on January 20th at noon.
Morgan, listen, it gets a little chilly there in Ohio as well. But Trump said it's going to be a little too cold, so we got to go indoors and it's just going to be too chilly. My little hands won't be warm, my little gloves.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely know how to deal with cold, and I too was out there during the Obama inauguration, so knew what it was to face the elements. But yeah, I mean, and I'll also be watching just the content. I mean, I know it's there's a lot of chaos going on, but I do think these early hours even of this administration are going to be interesting, and just what types of things he's signaling. What types of policies that he's putting forth. I agree with Michael. There's a lot of chaos in that first administration, but it does also seem like there's a different set of players in the mix this time, and certainly other new folks who are advising him in the White House. And so it'll be interesting to see. Again, I think these first few hours and days are going to be really indicative of just the whole tone of the next couple of years.
And Matt, don't be trying to call me just petty. Here is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and commenting, quote tweeting the Associated Press story about everything being moved indoors. He goes, "There's no such thing as bad weather." He said, "Just bad clothing."
Well, I'll tell you, one of the bad things they had at that Obama inauguration was only like 4 porta potties. That's what I remember. Like, man, you got all these people out here. But in any event, as Kev on stage would say, Trump and his people are an unserious people. And it's really kind of sad if you think about it, that you would have the press secretary out there talking about the size of an inauguration. Like, this is a new administration. There are far more pressing matters. There are global matters that need to be handled and economic matters. And you're out here talking about the National Park Service and whether they keep data so you can substantiate what number of people came or didn't come. I mean, that is a very unserious thing to be worried about. And I think that's something that's permeated our politics these days, where we've allowed our politicians to start focusing on things that don't matter. But I'm hoping that Morgan is right, and we'll start to see very early, starting with the inauguration, how this administration is going to handle things. But I'm concerned, to Michael's earlier point, that it is going to start being chaos. And frankly, I think it's going to be more than chaos.
First part, not started, it's already started.
Of course, but I think it's going to be purposeful, not only chaotic, but purposeful, just brutality. I think he's already signaled that, talking about being a dictator on day one. And that's what I'm battening down the hatches for, that they're going to come in and just start doing crazy stuff out the gate.
I'm also give y'all this. This was Amy Klobuchar when she announced she was running for president in this snowstorm in Minnesota. So they're like, yeah, whatever. This is not that big.